Hey guys, I want to talk about gold and Bitcoin. In fact, I'm going to state it now right at the start. If you support gold or you're a gold bug, as they call themselves, right? Gold bug, and you argue against Bitcoin, you're a bully. And I'll talk about that now, why you are a bully or not. Okay. And I get a lot of complaints, emails, comments, DMs coming back to me saying, hey, Patrick, I think you're being fair. You're being supportive of the other side more than you are of this side. Okay. I want to state it clearly, right? I'm not. So who am I? In terms of my background. So obviously I work in banking all my life. I have that bias towards banking because that's where most of us actually, Bitcoin is still fairly new. So that means you always come from the traditional sense of trusting money, trusting the banking sector, always having a fallback in case things go wrong. Okay, if something goes wrong tomorrow, I can call out the bank, okay, or I can make sure I trace the money and get my cash back. Bitcoin, once it's gone, it's gone. So we're still a bit new to this tech. We don't trust the tech as much. So there's always that fear of, hey, are you being supportive of this side or the other? But I want to make it clear now that, right, I'm not supportive of anyone, number one, for this reason, because I'm the CEO of Oruka. So Oruka is a payment ring. So what that means is you can tap to pay wherever you are. Okay. We're a banking app and we're a fintech, but we're not a bank in that sense, right? So what that means is you can tap to pay, you see your transactions in our app, you configure your ring. But what that means as well is that this ring works with crypto. So if you've got a Binance account, Coinbase account, crypto, we're talking to Strike at the moment, you can tap to pay and pay with crypto on your ring. Oh wait, if you don't go traditional finance, we work with MasterCard and Visa, you can tap to pay. Just top up with Revolut or any of the top banks. So I would like to think I'm as independent as they come because predominantly we care about customers. Okay, so excuse me. If you order the ring, you're getting a ring that works with anything. Okay, so we are as independent as it comes. Okay, we have no sides here. That being said, or lack of support for anyone. Okay, that being said, we have to understand and look at the history of everything and look at it and say, okay, where do we stand now? Okay, and where are we going and why are we arguing against Bitcoin or against gold? Okay, that's always the argument. Let's look at the history. Okay, so Bitcoin has been around for, since 1971, or before 1971, since 600 BCE. That's over 2,600 years Bitcoin has been around. Okay, that's a lot of years to learn, a lot of trials and tribulations to go through and configure yourself and learn and reinvent yourself. But it failed as money because it used to be money until 1971 when Reagan came over and said, whoops. And you can read histories on this, right? There's a lot of history around why, money got decoupled from Bitcoin. From gold. Previously, if you had $1, you could go redeem it against gold. Okay. Same thing as well. If you had any other currency, and you could match it to the dollar, you could. Central banks need to have dollars. Until 1971, when that got decoupled, then money just became its own. Okay, and there's a lot of debt just floating around there right now. Okay, I have a whole video on this about 300 and something trillion debt is what we all owe in cash. The whole world. Or it's obviously to the rich, because the rich are the ones that are buying the debt. Okay, we're buying each other's debt, but the rich are the most like holders of debt here. So what that means then is that we're all in debt, okay, such that because of this cash, so gold has failed. As soon as it got decoupled, that's when gold failed, because then it became a store of value. But it's still important. However, it's learned for over 2,000 years. Okay, so that's something to watch out for. Okay, that, number one, the history of a store of value is very important. Okay, now I want to talk about again the volatility as well. That's something everyone always argues about on both sides of the fence. Okay, so gold, believe it or not, is less volatile, but it's always volatile. It is as volatile as it gets as an asset. For a store of value, it is volatile, but it's not as volatile as Bitcoin. So that's something to watch out for. Then the other hand as well, Bitcoin. So I'll talk about Bitcoin and gold. So people argue that Bitcoin has no intrinsic value other than a social network. I agree with that. Gold, on the other hand, has more intrinsic value because of what it can do in commerce. So for computers, for chips, you always need a pattern of gold as well for jewelry. Okay. But that doesn't justify the price. We know how much gold's currently going at, I think that's something grand a house now. That's a lot for an ounce, right? And then you can't say that's a value because of a commercial value. No, because it has an intrinsic value. Someone thinks that they can sell that gold for more. That's why it's that that's why it's that expensive. So the physical and intrinsic value is there for both sides, gold and for anyone holding Bitcoin. Bitcoin, someone playing somewhere, but the social value of Bitcoin is intrinsic enough. Okay, so I think in general, if you look at it, and I'm going to be honest with you, right, head to head, right, if you compare them both from a returns point of view, gold just hedges there in terms of the risk reward ratio. Bitcoin less so. Same thing as well. If you look at the utility, gold can be used for debt. For again, if things come to us, there's going to be in our apocalypse, you can use gold to make payments. Okay, I mean, I'm looking at gold here. I can tell you right now, there's a different feeling when you hold it. So this, by the way, I got this gold for back there I think it was $50. Now it's currently 100 and something, 140. It literally makes no sense, and you can see the markets. Let me see if you can zoom in there. So that's how tiny it is. This is a gram of gold. Very skinny, very tiny. But there's something around it, right? So for millennia, we've known gold. We like the shiny metal and we touch it, but look how tiny it is. But this, just holding it, there's something to it, right? Anyone that's handled gold will understand what I mean. There's something to it where we love it, right? We hold on to it, which you don't have with Bitcoin. So just that, from a human point of view, right? Just heuristic point of view, we love gold and we love to see, touch and feel things like that. That being said, I think, again, I'm going to go into why I said anyone arguing with Bitcoin. So when gold guys sit and argue Bitcoin, it's a bit of, let's call it bullying, yeah, for good reason. Why? Let's look at the history of money, right? So we talked about how money started. So money started firstly from, like trade by barter. And you go to one point where like, whoa, about, I think it was 9,000 BC to 1,200, about 8,000 years, non-stop, people were using cow and cattle and sheep to trade. So people thought that cows and goats were important. You're going to use it. So you could trade it. But guess what? You couldn't carry your cow around because, number one, you could get sick if you're going to go trade it somewhere. Okay, before you get onto a boat and travel all the way down to the other side of the world, it would cause an issue, right? So it would die or something or get sick. So to make that a bit more long, in terms of longevity, they decided to move from livestock to grains. But that's where they talked about Bailey. Again, Bailey was around for 2,400 years. So firstly, we had commodity for 9,000. Right? And then we go into then salt, which salt came after grains. And salt was around for 3,000 years again. Same thing, 3,000 years of non-stop evolution, reviewing across various centuries, various generations, okay? Going in and out across Ethiopia, China, Rome especially came up with the idea of salt, the salary. Okay, so you see all that. And then gold came right after that. Again, gold came around 3000 BCE. Okay, it started with precious metals, copper, and then it went into gold because of the shiny and the fact that it was scarce compared to the others. But that's about 2,600 years it's been around. Yeah, which has been around and has gone through that, or in terms of recycle. Now compare that to crypto. Crypto has only been around for 19 years. And you're arguing with crypto. That's one thing to notice, right? And that's one thing to say. No matter how much you argue and go, I'm going to talk about this separately. Peter Schiff and what's your guy name? The guy is Stripe. Whaler, forgotten his name. I talked to him, I've forgotten his name. He's they were sitting there and argue, and it was the best analogy you can look at ever, because Peter Schiff is really old, about 60. I think he must be in his 60s now, and he was arguing with a young guy who possibly is Bitcoin. So just looking at them both was the exactly what it illustrates in the points you're trying to make. Peter was old and arguing about gold, while this guy was young and arguing about Bitcoin. But they're two different generations. The same thing with gold. Gold is 2,600 years old that we've been using gold for non-stop. We've learned, we've evolved, it's gone up and down. We've decided to move from what it was to a store of value. Guys, think about that for a minute. If anyone had stopped you when gold came right after copper, precious metals, gold came in, and anyone said, hey, gold is crap, and people started arguing, right? And said, hey, what's gold going to be in 2,000 years? No one could tell you that. It's 2,000 years away. Okay, so imagine what Bitcoin is going to be in 2,000 years. Again, I'm not arguing for Bitcoin here. I'm just saying, let's be fair with comparisons. Yeah, it takes a while for currencies to mature. Okay, so gold at 2,600 years is matured. It's gone through ups and downs, seen a lot of generations. It started from just pure barter. Right now, this is 120. If I was going to give this to you, if I give this to an audience member now and say, okay, can you split it in two? They'll have to firstly check if it's real. So you're paying money for that. And then you go in there and you check if, how you're going to split it, maybe cut it in two. But you have to cut it exactly in two. It's not divisible, right? And people argue that you can get paper points and then you can maybe try and tokenize this and go in and tokenize it and get paper. But that's money again. But what you want is gold. What you want is the real thing, okay? So what do you do there? So it's not divisible. It doesn't work, right? And that was why it became a store of value. It was easy to get into a store of value because people said, okay, if you can't trade this with each other, central banks decided to hold this together. And then they held it and said, okay, you know what? Every time you can trade money with each other, you can move things around, you can divide it as much as you want, but you can't use this because it's just not malleable, it's not mutable, you just can't carry it around. It's heavy. This again, I repeat, this is 120. So imagine holding $120. If it goes up to 10,000, you can't hold it. This is how tiny it is. Trust me, if you're holding 10,000, it's heavy. If you get on a plane with that, they'll stop you or arrest you, actually, right? So here's the point. I repeat again, guys. It's not fair on that point in terms of just the sheer age between gold and Bitcoin. Bitcoin is only 19 years old. That's very young in the look of currencies. I've talked about currencies. Grain, cattle was for 9,000 years before it arrived at maturity. Salt, 3,000 years it was on. Okay. Same thing with commodity, wheat, shells, barley, all those. People are using them for years, centuries. Yeah, close to 1,800 years then. So it's not fair to sit and say, hey, Bitcoin has been around for 19 years. Why is it not done more? Is it going to be obsolete? I think there's a few people using that word as well with me. They're like, is it going to be obsolete? We don't know. It could be obsolete in 500 years, 5,000 years. But before then, we have to admit it's a very, very good tech. And it's very young. That's my argument. It's a very young tech that we're judging too soon. We could do more, right? So I can tell you, so our rings are coming up there, and that helps with payments because now Bitcoin, you can do more with it, okay? Because again, that was the issue. People didn't know how to pay Bitcoin. Bitcoin was, I think was invented specifically for peer-to-peer payments. That was it. Satoshi was a peer-to-peer payment. Check the white paper. But then people that were not sure how to join, how this thing move around. It's very complex, I can tell you. So what we're seeing now, I think what would help, utilization of Bitcoin would be people like us using the rings so that you don't have to care about what Bitcoin does. All you know is you're tapping to pay, as you do with your bank. In fact, that's how much cash is evolving. That this, for banks, this is fairly new. No bank is going to give you a ring. Some banks might. I don't know any bank that does, but they might, given the expenses to go away. I think it's inconvenience. That's the point. Because you have to go away and this has no charge. Okay. So people like, I'm going to talk about this separately, but, Apple and Aura that are trying to do this, there's just no money in it. That's why they're not interested in doing it. Okay. But here's the point. If your bank does this, there's no money in them as well. So that's why they'd rather not. So it's fairly new. There's just the encouragement is not there to provide this, let's call it utility for Bitcoin to customers. But when that comes, which is coming, okay, people like us are the first to go on in this. Well, when that comes, then what's going to happen then is, trust me, a lot of people are going to use it more. Even if they don't use it, gold would use it. Yeah, that's the argument. So I remember I was looking at Peter Schiff. There's quite a few other people that do an ETF on gold. So what's going to happen is then you will have gold that is tokenized, that uses a blockchain. And guess what? Bitcoin was invented using the blockchain. So that would mean you're using a part of Bitcoin. Satoshi invented blockchain.